Hi there. Today I want to share with you the differences between the New Revised Standard Version and the Inclusive Version, New Testament. Now, the Inclusive Version, according to its introduction, is a new version of the Bible that speaks more directly than ever before to today's social concerns, especially the move towards universal inclusivity. Now, this is something which is currently a hot topic right now. There is conflict in churches over these particular issues, and I thought I would look at this particular translation and what changes it sought to make to the NRSV to make it more inclusive. And I've taken here as an example the book of Philemon. Now, Philemon is a book which does punch above its weight. It was very instrumental in the abolitionist movement, and especially with Paul's language, he seeks to reconcile Philemon and Onesimus together as brothers in Christ, regardless of their social status and economic status. So let's take a look at the small number of changes which the inclusive version made to the NRSV text. So up here in verse 1, we have fellow soldier replaced with companion in struggle. Now, the introduction to the inclusive version does mostly go through how it seeks to rectify gender exclusivity, how it seeks to also fix in its mind racial exclusivity in translational choices. One example is it uses, it tries to avoid things like darkness being in a negative context, and also hierarchical or even patriarchal differences. So you won't have Lord mentioned as often. That was another one of their key ideas to bring about in this translation. But it seems also that they take offense to any militaristic context or content, especially in regards to the Christian life. And as we see here, fellow soldier to companion in struggle. Next, in verse 3, we have God our Father to God our Father Mother. So that is something which is common in many mainstream churches. For instance, in my own country, New Zealand, the Anglican prayer book refers to God as a Father Mother. We see further down, we have in verse 12, I'm sending him is changed to Onesimus. Now that was a common change throughout the NRSV to make those kinds of calls. So it seems that they seem to have taken this further to its perhaps logical conclusion. Here's an interesting one. In verse 16, no longer a slave, but more than a slave. There is an avoidance in inclusive language to label someone as being their state. So you are not someone who, you are not a leper, for instance, but you suffer from leprosy, or you suffer from skin disease. And here we see instead of a slave, you are no longer as one enslaved, but more than that. But here, when we reach the end of verse 16, we get to perhaps a more controversial change. So both in the flesh and in the Lord. Now the Lord is changed to Christ. We also see that at the end of verse 20. Now, according to my Nestle Island 28, there are no textual variants for those particular words. There is one for the very end of verse 20 where it says, refresh my heart in Christ. And Codex D says, refresh my heart in the Lord. But there's none corresponding to their two changes at the end of 16 and near the end of verse 20 to say the Lord to Christ. So this seems to be more rather than a textual change, it's purely perhaps a dogmatic change, we might call it. They felt that it was important to remove lordship language from the translation. Interesting. And finally, as we get to the end of this very short letter, verse 23, Epaphras, my fellow prisoner in Christ Jesus in the NRSV, or in the inclusive version, Epaphras, a prisoner with me. Again, they're removing the identification as a prisoner. They do not want to label someone who is imprisoned as being a prisoner. Interesting. And so do Mark, Aristarchus, Demas, and Luke, my, instead of fellow workers, co-workers. That's perhaps just a linguistic change, maybe to suit modern American usage more. I'm not sure why they chose that, and it doesn't seem to me to be a particularly inclusive change, but I'd be interested to hear your comments. What do you think of the inclusive version? Do you think perhaps with the upcoming NRSVU we'll see a lot more of these sorts of changes published in the NRSV text? Or will this perhaps remain off to the side as an interesting bypath in the work of Bible translation?